this is a regular
love
this
her.
is now being
okay.
7
She's so
o'clock.
wonderful.
I'm sorry,
And this
I
is a regular
apologize, Maureen. I
meeting
was
of
talking to
the
accountant
Zoning
when
Board
you
of
came in.
Appeals of
And
the
he's
Town
like
of
doing me this big
Orleans.
favor, and Jim's
Present are
on there.
myself and constituting a quorum are
And I really didn't want to meet
members
them. Just that makes it
Todd
so I was
Well, the
just-
buyer
and
was the agent.
Peter.
It was?
Peter, additionally, Ms. Van Giesen and Beth McCartney. Also present is the Board Secretary, Sandy Stewart. The purpose of this meeting, there are no public hearings scheduled for this evening. The agenda includes 2 items, I believe, plus whatever else may arise before the meeting. But the one is the possible election of officers, which would be the secretary or recorder of the board and the chair, vice chair for the following year. We're now in fiscal year 2019 for municipal purposes, even though today is July 18th, 2018. The other item is an accommodation that, in my opinion, the Orleans Planning Board, through the town planner, invited this board and others for comment on the proposed amendment to the zoning bylaws concerning the amendment relative to marijuana establishments. This is somewhat overdue, I think. The town has not yet acted, and there will be a public hearing on July 24th, 2018 at 7 p.m. And I thought, and I raised the question before, I thought it would be a good idea to discuss this in a collegial way, and I offer to present to, orally at least, to the planning board on July 24th at the hearing, which would express the views, majority or minority of the board, or the comments, or if you wish, you may speak for yourself as being a member of the Zoning Board of Appeals or as an individual citizen. It's up to you, and I pass no judgment on it. My offer to everyone here is that I will appear and present orally. There was an email interchange between myself and Mr. Meservey today as to whether there were written comments that they should be received by tomorrow by the planning board. I told him I thought that if I expected to present, but I expected to present orally, and he said that would be all right. If there's any burning desire to have written commentary on this amendment, then fine, then we'll have to decide or figure out who's going to draft it and how we can vet it amongst ourselves. So my suggestion is, for the time being, that we hear the comments that we have, or lack of comments, and I will do the best that I can, if you trust me to do so, to the planning board, with or without your presence next week.
That's a simple procedural question. for
Yes,
next
Peter.
week. If I show up, should I identify myself as both a resident and a member of the Zoning Board of Appeals, or just if I want to talk?
Because you are.
I mean,
You
should
are.
I-
That's fine.
It's okay to do
Yes,
that? Okay.
yes. I'm just making an accommodation, that if you didn't want to go and you have something to say tonight,
Yeah.
and I record it correctly, then I'll say that one member, 2 members
Okay.
of the board took this
Got
position,
it.
and other members of the board took this other position.
Okay.
I have no intention, just to be discreet, of if there's any great disagreement amongst the board, as individuals as we are, then I have no intention of disclosing that it's disagreement. Rather, the better way of putting that is we have different ideas on it.
Okay.
You know, for example, Mr. Mulligan, who will not be with us tonight, he weighed in independently, and I think you've probably seen that. He had a reservation, and I agreed with him. Then I'll also already forwarded that to Mr. Meserve.
Okay.
Something about the bond that has to be filed.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, he thought it was, well, I don't know how to, I don't want to characterize his opinion, but
It bound us in a way that he didn't think was appropriate to be bound.
that's a fair way of putting it. It really went a little bit too far, and it wasn't necessary for marijuana retail establishments. It would be for a farm, and that makes sense, because the purpose behind the bond is to set aside some dough or money or indemnity amount that would take care of that in case of a change of circumstances, or the license was snapped. Anyway, I don't know if I have a suspicion that you've had enough time to read the proposed amendment. It's here, and the town proposes that rather than the planning board or the architectural review board or the housing authority or the board of selectmen proposes that the zoning board of appeals would be the licensing authority. I think that that's sensible, because as a business, in a way, for town business, where we are familiar with and through the course of time have become experienced in the ability to conduct adversarial proceedings and make findings and decisions based upon the zoning bylaw, the way it's written. We know how to do that, and to do it in a civilized way, and to do it so that it will stand up in case of scrutiny by a judge or the public, for that matter. We give everyone a chance to say their piece. Every member of the Zoning Board of Appeals has a chance to examine and consider and discuss amongst ourselves, so we know how to do that, and in a way that really makes sense. I have random thought. There's a similar procedure, and that is for the 40B petitions. We are the last decider of resort in the town concerning those type of projects. The difference between an applicant for marijuana licensing and a 40B applicant is that there aren't any other steps. If a 40B applicant comes into us, they've already been vetted by the state in one form or another, but fire and police and planning board and all other boards are notified of the application and are allowed to make their input either in writing or in person at the time that we conduct a hearing. That particular, and it's cumbersome for one reason, there must be a reason for it, but it is kind of cumbersome. We don't have that kind of input. Speaking for myself, I have always felt that the modern way of doing business between public bodies is to have the vehicles so that there can be communication and input. And there have been a number, 2 or 3 times, when I have sought the advice of the, say, planning board on certain issues. I personally feel that the planning board has the big picture of the town that we don't have, because we're acting on a decision by decision basis. and the planning board has the big picture. And sometimes when we're interpreting, say, even something as simple as a special permit, it's valuable to know how that a broad standard, such as whether there's a substantial disconnect between the town bylaw and the proposed development as stated in the application. And sometimes you need more than just people who want the application or those who are in the neighborhood and don't want it. And the broader picture that's the citizenry of the town can bring. And unless you solicit the input from the planning board, for example, or some other town board, then we kind of are left with exactly the evidence that we hear on a given night. And we've all seen when an application comes to us, we try to decide as the last resort, so that if there have been, the Kings Highway Commission has to be involved, or the Architectural Review, or the Historical Commission, because that's been involved. We know that's checked off, so that by the time the folks get here, they've done all their due diligence, and we know that if the specialized knowledge and function of another board or another boards have reviewed it. Now, that's just a long way of saying that vehicle is not in place in here, and in this amendment. And the question might be, one might say, well, you know, should there be? I don't think that I'm looking for a condition that there be an approval by another board, because that would take away the authority that's the town wants the zoning board to have, although input or reports from other boards are really very, very helpful. And I use that analogy to the 40B petition as something which I thought was really a sensible and wise way of approaching the problem. Should this particular aspect be presented to the planning board? Now, I suppose the planning board would only be flattered to suggest that there be a report of the planning board as a condition to come before the zoning board. But it certainly wouldn't do any harm, you know.
Involve police and traffic study, and
That's right, that's right.
there's some basics that have to be met.
I didn't see that in the amendment.
Sorry.
Is that something we ought to be
So-
suggesting?
It seems to me that, or my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, is that the planning board said there is an amendment to the zoning bylaws that is going to be presented to the town voters for approval or not. We would appreciate it if the zoning board of appeals felt it appropriate to share their comments or perspective on this, since if it's approved by the town voters, ultimately, when the request for a permit comes in, the body that will decide whether to approve or deny is this body,
That's right.
based on our interpretation of the zoning bylaw as it fits with the other zoning bylaws. And again, I'm always confused about special permit and variance, but I think the key element is going to be that that requires discussion of its impact on the neighborhood, on the character of the neighborhood. That's
I think that's,
the one that is the big and the all and the end and the blah, blah.
that hasn't been
So
taken away.
if that's the correct understanding, I don't believe that this board is capable of coming up with a joint recommendation other than the one that Mr. Mulligan offered last week, which we discussed. That was a sense of the board. If we come up with another such recommendation, we agreed last meeting that you would present it on behalf of the board. Just as a quick comment to Mr. Jablin's query,
Yes,
he ought identify himself as a member of the board in the interests of transparency and full disclosure, but I would not expect him to represent his position as reflecting the position of the board.
I wasn't
No,
intending to.
no,
yeah.
understood,
No,
but I
he-
just am
yeah.
confirming that.
yes.
So, to that extent, our function here tonight continues to be, is there anything that we as a committee feel we want to communicate to the planning board? That's our function here, right?
That's right.
Other than that, we're all individual citizens
That's right.
who can do what we wish in our individual capacity
That's-
and as members of the board. All right, I just,
No, that's what I was
Sorry
saying in
to
the
have gone through
No,
that,
no,
but-
that's how I was saying in kind of a verbose way, and then I
Okay.
digressed and suggested a couple of questions which will pass through my mind that might, the board might be considering. I have no, and if unless there's consensus on those, then I may or may not individually mention that to the, to the planning board. You know what happens, Bruce? The zoning bylaw gets amended at town meeting every 3 years. No, most recently was a 3 months ago. And, you know, and we never speak. The planning board all carries the hard.
was that the change on the upland? What was the change?
Not yet, we haven't done that,
Oh.
but I've gone ahead and suggested that by, that was pretty much the sense of the board.
Mhm.
And I suggested, and Mr. Meserve said he would bring that to the attention of the planning board. I explained that, and I think I sent you a copy of the email because it's been troubling.
Yes.
This amendment doesn't trouble me at all. I mean, to me, it's a matter of licensing a very different type of business, that's all. So,
Can I ask a couple of questions?
yes,
Are these establishments all going to be in commercial areas? They're not going to be residential, are they?
no, this is,
Well,
By definition.
no, part of it was,
No.
part of it was a
Business,
change.
general business,
Mhm.
village center.
Okay.
What is I?
In the industrial, must be an
Oh,
industrial zone.
Okay.
So,
Well, it doesn't make sense for them to have cultivation in general business and limited business.
Could be a limited business, but general business, not so
Yeah, I
much.
mean-
Like Locust Road is
General
limited-
business?
Limited business.
Limited business.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, where's there any acreage that they could,
Have a nice big garden.
yeah, okay.
Didn't I read here somewhere that people are allowed to cultivate it on their own property within 50 feet
For
of
personal
something?
use,
What was that?
for personal use, I thought.
Oh, okay.
The rule on that, as I read it, is that any individual can grow 3 plants or 6 plants, and any household can grow either 6 or 12. I don't remember the specifics. And the only constraint was that the plants not be visible by the public from, if you want to be technical, the statute says 1,000 feet.
I
So-
thought, something like that, yeah.
Well, on Special permit requirements, E2E says proposed security measures, including lighting, fencing, gates, and alarms, surveillance cameras to ensure safety and security from theft. I mean, if they have a secure building with an alarm system, I don't think they're gonna need fencing and gates.
You're confusing the retail sale establishment from the cultivation, I believe.
Yeah.
That's for the cultivation?
This is for a retail, well, it's called a marijuana establishment, but that's retail sale is what that is.
Retail, okay, I'm sorry, I was thinking that was for retail sales, okay, never mind. Well, I mean, the Theory Wellness up in Bridgewater is like this huge warehouse. There's completely surrounded by a parking lot. They have a camera when you go in where you show your ID, and they buzz you in, and then they check it again, and then they buzz you in again. But there's no fencing around the outside.
You're talking about the,
Theory Wellness in Bridgewater?
which is a medical establishment.
Right, and they have no interest in doing recreational, which sort of surprised me. But I'm saying if the really secure places are, I can understand. For the recreational, I guess it doesn't seem to me like needs that much security. Maybe I'm wrong.
I read that to be that it's up to the board to make sure there's enough.
Enough
No
security?
matter which way it is. If they need a fence, they should have a fence. If they don't need a fence, they don't need a fence.
Okay,
But that would be a board determination.
okay,
Ours,
so,
yeah.
okay. Yeah, I mean,
Yes, yes.
I agree.
depending where it's located, what's gonna be needed,
Right.
so. It's obviously not gonna be next to a school.
Now, just thinking out loud here. I had 20 years of experience in this arena. You know, as a parole officer, and then a licensed substance abuse counselor, and then a counselor, substance abuse counselor in a state prison. So I'm familiar with a lot of aspects of this. Okay? Won't go into them now. But anyway, I believe one thing that, if it's within our power, is to make these establishments be a good distance from schools, like 5,000 feet or something. Thinking of the middle school, which is an age where kids start trying this, and there's a pond behind it, and then 6A, and then some properties that could be rented, either in the Staples Plaza, or there are a couple of old homes for sale. I would not want a marijuana distributor to be that close to any school. So I'm just throwing that out.
Okay.
We have the power to, well, we have the power to suggest that.
You
But
do.
I'm making that suggestion.
I'm trying to think of how that could be implemented. You
Well,
certainly could define it by an area that was measured by a defined radius,
Mhm.
whatever that would be. The difficulty with that would be that you would, now, let's see, then, and under those circumstances then, Peter, you would exclude, or that would be a prohibited use in that circle.
For marijuana distributor, or whatever you call it.
Okay,
store.
well, and cultivation too, I would think. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm thinking of the schools around that Eddie, well, that's out of our town, but Nauset Middle School, Orleans Elementary,
Okay, and they're basically a quarter of a mile apart from each other.
and, what I'm really aiming at is 6A Staples Plaza, and those little businesses, there's a vacant garage, automobile garage that probably could be purchased or leased for this purpose. In the states that have legalized it, like Colorado, I have statistics showing that one of the problems with this legalization is some of us, when we were in high school, would get older kids to buy beer for us,
Right.
okay? And what happens is that people who meet the age requirement to buy legal marijuana sell it to kids. And in Colorado, there's a 12-year-old kids are starting to use, especially 12-year-old minorities. So I'm just trying to keep this sales center as far from schools as we can get away with, frankly.
Fine. Now,
I think you have to put an overlay in the village district, and depending on, if you do it 5,000 feet from the school, that could eliminate all of downtown Orleans.
Well, then, make it 4,000.
Well, I mean, I think
yeah.
you have to see what that circumference entails.
But I'm thinking that this is something we need to look at,
Right.
because the tattooed guys who ride bicycles and smoke cigarettes and don't wear crash helmets, that means they've lost their license for life, and they're probably addicts and stuff, and they do what I'm talking about. They buy marijuana legally, sell it to kids, and they ride their bikes around. So I just don't want to make it too easy for them. So I just, I don't know
Alright.
how to frame that any other way. Maybe 2,500 square feet. Then again, you're going to have the banana effect. Build anything not anywhere near me or whatever, you know. People on Main Street are probably not going to be crazy about it, okay? But I just trying to get it as far away from the schools as I can, which is not an uncommon practice in
No,
other
no.
states and places that I've been. So,
well.
throwing it out.
No, and you probably could establish that there's a public purpose in what you've described by anchoring the prohibited area around schools.
yeah,
That would be relatively easy in this town because we're only talking about those two public schools.
Nelson
Private
Middle and
school?
Orleans
Yes,
Elementary,
Are there any private
I don't think
schools
so.
now?
No, the charter school moved to
the
Harvard.
charter school moved.
Yeah, so the only question then would be, what if the town would adopt that kind of exception
Yep.
and make a prohibited area? I think that I imagine, quite sure that the Attorney General would have to pass on it, but that would be almost equivalent to creating a new zoning district, but not really.
Yeah, because it's only
No,
one type of
because
business.
it's only one type of business.
Right.
Okay,
But,
the question is, how large the radius ought to be.
yes, so, you know, what is going to be impacted? I mean, certainly, middle school kids hang around and play, or whatever, in the green right next to the library. That's a common meeting place, and it's very easy to see policemen coming, okay? So it's a ideal spot for transferring from the tattooed bicyclists to middle schoolers. So, you know, 1,000 feet would take care of that, but I don't know. I'm very open to suggestions. I would go out and, I don't know, research it myself. But I just don't know how to frame it.
Okay.
Now, another thing that I'm thinking about is this. This may be outside the box, outside our purview, but my experience has indicated to me that most people who enter the legal marijuana business are not strangers to the business. So I don't know what the state vetting is on these folks, but if it's allowable in the zoning of these establishments, I would recommend a record check on owners and operators and exclude people with any felonies whatsoever and any charges whatsoever to do with drug trafficking or use.
I was under the impression that that vetting was already done by the Cannabis Control
Okay.
Commission downtown, upstate.
Maybe, however,
Yeah.
also in my experience, I find that law enforcement is often very well-intentioned and professional, but they miss things.
Okay, but what would we be doing here on it with an applicant to, as a double check to what had been, what?
How would we
vetting-
do it? We would
Yeah.
require them to get a background check, nationwide background check, not just Barnstable County, at the police station, who is more than qualified to do that. And they might have to pay for it, but that goes with the territory.
Is that part of the licensing though, that we're not responsible for?
Well, again, I'm saying that my experience has told me that things fall through the cracks. Like the bus driver who got T-boned by a dump truck, he had like 6 or 7 traffic violations. Yet he was still driving a school bus, and kids died. Something fell through the cracks legally, because I've seen it, been through it. So I would, if we have the power to do it, I would require the Orleans Police to do a nationwide check on the owners, operators, and have the owner-operators pay for it as part of doing business with this somewhat volatile enterprise.
Okay,
So that would be a special permit requirement, right?
In my opinion, it would be, because I don't want the tattooed bicycle guys there. We're gonna have some people with glaucoma, some with cancer, and I think that is perfectly fine. But I don't want this downward distribution to younger children, which is occurring in Denver.
well,
And
okay,
other places.
okay, Peter, but let me understand the procedure.
Yep.
Those kind of folks would never be able to get to this table because they'd be excluded. They wouldn't be able to generate the proper criminal background check, so they'd be ineligible.
But they can buy.
Okay.
See, that's, you know,
Oh, that's probably a little bit beyond this. Yeah.
well, what I'm trying to
Yeah.
say is that
I understand.
I want-
Okay.
I want people in the sales business, the legal sales business, to be as ethical as we can possibly have them be. Okay?
Okay, then that means that you would require we give a license to sell, and the retailer sells to an improper person, then the question is, what happens to the license? I don't know that, except for the annual renewal, Peter, the zoning board's not gonna be the enforcer.
I understand that.
We don't enforce. The building inspector, in a way, does our enforcement stuff, but we really don't. We don't ride herd on.
I understand. What I'm trying to do is ensure that the operators of these retail establishments are as ethical as we can possibly have them be.
That's a good thing. Bruce, can you help us out?
Yes, I think I can. I think we're confusing legislative functions from judiciary functions. And that the zoning board of appeals has no business involved in legislative functions, to the extent that the zoning bylaw being considered by the town should or shouldn't include some of the things that Peter is referring to is not a decision that's appropriate to the zoning board, in my opinion. And while I respect the concerns he's expressing, they're not appropriately, in my opinion, before us as a zoning board. This is the opinion of a citizen who feels passionately about this and intends and hopes to influence the legislation that is passed and that is presented to and passed or fails at the town level. I'm very uncomfortable with any notion that the zoning board would opine in any way on these factors. It's not appropriate.
Okay, now Bruce, let me just add this. the 1,000 or 2,000 square feet, I think
Oh,
is
let me-
totally
let-
appropriate.
Let me comment
Yeah.
on that, let me comment
Yeah.
on that. Thank you. There is a criminal law that you are not allowed to possess with the intent to distribute within 1,000 feet of a school that's on the books currently, and that has within it a mandatory sentence if you are convicted. And I'm quite familiar with this only because there was a constitutional challenge to it when it was passed, saying this prejudices the inner city where there are a gazillion schools within 1,000 feet, whereas out in the countryside, anybody can do it and all those people are free, and that constitutional challenge failed. But there is, these are things that are appropriate for the police department, the health department, the safety department, the planning department. I don't have any problem with them asking for our input. But I don't think we can make input on the level. I appreciated Peter's comments. He said what he thinks. He said what he thinks is important. We're not going to, as a board, support that, and it's not appropriate to.
Okay, my response to that is things fall through the cracks. And I'm saying, let's give it a shot and have people say, no, you can't do that.
I'm not willing to do that.
Well,
So you can-
that's my opinion.
Well, then you should make it as a formal proposal. You should see if you get it, in my opinion.
Mhm.
You should make it as a formal proposal. You should see if you can get a second. There should be some discussion of it. We'd have a vote and
Oh,
we
you
know
mean
where we
tonight?
are.
Do this tonight?
I
Yeah.
don't know how else to do it. What
Okay.
are we talking about?
I wasn't thinking of making it anything as that formal.
Okay.
I don't think we have consensus on this, Peter. Well, I was trying to, my approach was exploring with you the other systems which are in place or could be in place, which would alleviate your well-founded concerns.
But my opinion is, things fall through the cracks, people, enforcement agencies, et cetera, get busy, et cetera, et cetera. I've been through this, so I know how it works. And if we put it in writing, it's another a check and balance. If we propose that and the town is willing to accept it, it's just another barrier for people with perhaps ill or questionable intentions.
Very well. Let me, I understand Bruce's position. I wonder whether we have consensus with those questions which Peter Jablin has raised, whether whether there's agreement that those concerns should be presented with the consensus of the Zoning Board of Appeals. Bruce says no, and I think no also that there are other systems in place to alleviate or soften the danger, which Peter so eloquently expresses, but I don't think that the proposed amendment creates a real danger. A little concerned about the perimeter of the circle around the schools. I can understand that, and that would be something for the town to determine how large that radius or ought to be, if they decided to go that way. In other words, to prohibit any marijuana establishment whatsoever in that circle around the schools. And that's easy to define. It's completely geographical. It's not, but on the question of vetting or enforcing whether the zoning board ought to be the enforcer if a
Bless you.
licensee should distribute or sell marijuana to a certain purchaser.
No,
I
I
don't
didn't say
think so.
that. I didn't mean that.
Okay.
They have to sell it. You know, if a guy walks in there covered with tattoos, reeking of marijuana, in shabby clothes, they're gonna have to sell it to him, okay? But all I'm trying to do, again, is make it as clean as possible on the legal retail side. I want really clean people on the retail side. The bicyclists and stuff are gonna come.
But as purchasers,
Yeah.
you say, but, you know, I mean, there could be the doctors and the lawyers too. It doesn't really make any difference whether they're tattooed or
No,
whether you
what-
know
What
that
I'm
they're
trying to
tattooed.
say is, I know people can crawl into a marijuana store and buy it, and they'll have to sell it to them. I just want the purveyors to be as clean as possible. They may say no if a guy staggers in and reeks of marijuana, and they know him, they know
Okay.
of him,
Okay,
to be able to say no. We can't force them. I just want the cleanest people possible on the legal retail side.
I think that's to be accomplished by the Cannabis Control Commission
Well,
and the local police.
it doesn't always happen.
Okay. Do you have any other suggestions, Peter?
Those are the main ones. I mean, you know, what's going to happen, as what happened in other cities, will probably happen here, but that's not going to influence, it's already here. You know, it's here. So all we can do is just try to make it as clean a situation as possible. You know, the symptoms of your grandchildren and my grandchildren, that's going to have, you know, regardless, it's here, it's coming, and I'm just, again, trying to make it as clean as possible. We don't have to put in that they have no felonies and all that. We could put in a softer statement such as, we want evidence that the owners, operators, and it's pretty clear, and they want everybody involved named. We just want to make sure that the owner-operators are vetted properly by the proper authorities and show evidence of it.
Well, it says here that they need to submit with their application copies of all required licenses and permits issued by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and any of its agencies for the marijuana establishment or retailer.
And again, my response is, I've seen it fall through the cracks so many times.
You can't plan for
What
what
else
falls
is
through
there
the cracks.
Well, we can if we put it in our
Well, you can't, I mean,
suggestion.
it doesn't make sense to make rules for what might fall through the cracks. I understand your concern, but they've got alcohol, the liquor license and whatnot. Are we gonna put stricter regulations on who they can hire
That's
than the
not
liquor
illegal
store?
with the federal government, and, you know, marijuana is still illegal in the federal government, okay? So, it's a gateway drug, it's proven over and over again that most addiction starts with marijuana,
And they come out
not,
with a lot of positive health benefits.
but the people who are gonna go to the store for glaucoma and cancer, they're gonna be very few in comparison to the percent that go there for recreational use or to buy and resell.
Well, when you look at our age population here, that may be wrong.
Well, based on
Probably
my
have a lot
personal
more glaucoma
experience,
than,
based on my personal experience, that's been the case. So, period. So again, I think a softer statement could be in there that when they show up here, that we're assured that they've been vetted, period. Vetted properly. I just want to make sure that the town of Orleans is protected and honored and served to the best of our ability.
Well, I understand the 2 points that you've raised, Peter.
Okay?
I do. Emily, do you have any comments on what Peter said, or Bruce, or me, or the proposed amendment in its entirety?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, having that proximity, far enough away from the schools, I think it's important, but whether it's, if it's there, it's there. Kids get it, whether it's legal or not, so. I think, what comes to my mind is, if it is part of the town, our town is so small, and we do have a lot of families that visit, will that impact, any of the people that visit the Cape, will that negatively impact their, do you know what I'm saying?
I do. I wonder not necessarily problems, what experiences did municipalities encounter in Colorado? To what extent was the culture of a town changed by the allowance of the sale of marijuana for recreational purposes? I have no knowledge of that. I would like to have that kind of
Does
firsthand.
Peter have an article here for us?
Yeah, I
Well,
do.
it's tough to regulate, and it's not, anybody could abuse it, whether they look like what we would think would be a stereotypical person or not.
Well, those, I'm talking about who resell. They buy to resell. And I'm just wondering, how would that negatively impact tourists?
I'm referring to if there is, a shop in town, if tourists are not educated on, benefits if it is for, medical use.
So you're saying
forth.
what, then that people would be put off
it's-
by having a marijuana center in Orleans? Is that what you mean?
That's my thought, yeah.
Oh.
If they're visiting
We
and
can't
it's
stop
that easily accessible, do you know what I'm saying?
I
And
do
if they're
know.
not educated enough to
I
to
do
know
know
that it's
that.
regulated,
Right.
since
Yeah.
it's still illegal federally.
So are you alluding or heading towards maybe having it in a place that's not, for example, SNAP and EBT cards, which are not popular among some segments of our society, that is on an off-road. In other words, it's on Finlay, which, behind bushes and stuff, and there's not a big sign that says SNAP EBT cards
Right.
here. So are you suggesting perhaps that the location be a bit more off the beaten track, something
Yeah,
like that?
that's, yes.
Well, I'd go
Yes,
with
that's what I'm
that.
alluding to. I mean,
Well,
because if you have to think, like,
I
if
think-
you're
I
at
think-
Hole in One with your family, and,
And across the lot,
yeah.
there's-
Well, I don't know. That doesn't shock me. And all right. Maybe it's an edgy.
It doesn't
edgy
shock
type of-
me either,
and
but
it's
for
an
some
edgy
people it may.
experience.
Okay,
I think
I
that
agree with it.
I think most folks want the establishment to be tucked away and down by the transfer station. I
Yeah.
really believe that.
I agree with you.
I
I
mean,
was thinking of Rayber right away.
I think that's. And in other words, if you can't see it, you don't have to worry about
And
it.
people who want it, as someone suggested, they're gonna find it. They'll know it's on Rayber if that's where it ends up.
My concern is this: there's a lot of money involved.
Absolutely, and again, people who are in this business go where the money is, and there's money here.
Yes, yes. That changes culture.
And it generates a tremendous tax income
It does do that.
to benefit the town and this
Well,
Commonwealth.
just remember, our grandchildren and children are not immune. Addiction and stuff like that doesn't only happen in the ghettos, okay? There's less money there, for one thing. Just illegal sales occur where the money is. There's money here, so all the grandchildren and children of people present on this board are,
Can I jump in there,
Yeah,
Peter?
sure. Go ahead.
Where I grew up was
Mhm.
an extremely wealthy area. The kids where I went to high school, they all drove Mercedes, at 17 years old.
right,
So, and, just from the experience in all the places I've lived, that was the most highly distributed situation I've seen.
exactly.
Because it's the money, there's a lot of money there,
Right.
and they can do it, and they can, so, yeah.
Because, if we don't have a marijuana establishment, which is a possible outcome, somebody's gonna have to drive all the way to Brewster to buy it, because they sure as hell are gonna have one.
Yeah,
So-
and
that is
that's
so
fine
far.
with me. I hate to say it, but that's fine with me. And if they have glaucoma, a relative can
Truro's
drive.
not gonna have one.
No, I
You
think-
know,
I mean, for
Yarmouth
tax
is not
purposes,
gonna
for the
have one.
town.
Orleans may or may not have one. Brewster is gonna have one. It's like, I just don't see, I'm happy that they invited our commentary. And I'm glad we caught that bond thing. I just think that where we're conversing now is outside our purview.
But we can give it a shot.
Can I,
What does give it a shot mean?
Pro-
I think that.
Again,
I
Mr.
think
Marnick
that-
is going to present these
I think that
ideas,
my, I think
whether we like
that
them or
my
not.
appearance says the right thing about the zoning board.
yes,
Do you agree with that?
I'm happy with your appearance, I'm
You know,
happy with your comment
that-
about the bond. I say again, how do we get out of this conversation except to put this to a vote? I know you don't.
Well, he's
you
gonna bring it
hadn't
up anyway when he
No,
goes
he's
to
not
meeting.
gonna bring it up.
Yeah, you said you were going to talk about,
I'll say that there were that one of the members made two suggestions, and the board members discussed with interest the definition of a prohibited area defined by the two schools in Orleans.
I'm gonna tell you that that's taken care of already,
That's all
fortunately.
that's all I'm gonna say
Okay,
about that.
okay.
Let's say there was another comment which was not adopted by a consensus of the board. And we stand willing and able to, if any amendment places the responsibility for licensing marijuana establishments under the zoning board of appeals, we're ready and willing to undertake that responsibility. I think that ought to be said in person.
do you think, are you going to mention that the other idea that where there was no consensus was about double vetting?
Yes, I'll mention that that was the question.
Le-
If you're there
okay.
and you can express yourself far more eloquently in your own position than I
Yeah,
can.
but I'm a wash ashore, and you're a well-established person.
Well, not really,
Influential.
not really.
Well, that's reality.
I haven't been on this shore much longer than you, Peter.
Michael, I have a couple more questions on
Yes.
procedures.
Yes,
On the second page, under general requirements, subparagraph 5, it says the marijuana establishment will provide the zoning board of appeals with names, phone number, and email addresses of management and staff and key holders to whom one can provide notice if there are operating problems associated with the establishment. I think that should go to police. I mean, are we suddenly gonna be the
Call if there's a
monitors
break-in?
for bad behavior
I-
at the marijuana establishment?
I think you
well,
have a
the
point.
police will know that we have the information.
So am I gonna get a call at midnight?
No, no,
No, that's not
no,
what
no,
I was
the
proposing.
the building commissioner, I think, would be the have this, all right, let's make the suggestion there.
Again, who's gonna reach him at midnight?
No, I mean, I wasn't
I'm
suggesting
talking about
behavior.
para 5 here,
Okay, we're-
Okay, then I think it should be
the
the,
police department.
yeah, if zoning board of
what page are
appeals.
you on?
And, no, page 2,
Okay.
D5, Peter, ME
Okay, got it.
shall provide the zoning board of appeals and the police department.
Oh, okay, all right.
Does anybody have any objection to that relatively small amendment?
No, that's good.
No, I
Okay,
think
then
that's
we
good.
do agree on
We
that.
need to have it on file, but the police department's obviously the person to call.
The idea here being that we're not enforcing it, but the person,
Right, I don't wanna call.
the police department is more likely to be enforcing, if there are operating problems, would be investigating and acting, not us.
Paragraph 6 then talks about the special permit being exclusive to the applicant, which is something that we frequently do.
Yes,
But then paragraph 7 says that it's gonna be issued for a term of 3 years.
yes,
Can they do that?
yes, yes, yes.
With a review every year, is
Yeah,
what
with-
I understand.
That's kind of.
I saw that too. I thought it was a review every year.
Usually when we grant a special permit, we grant a special permit, period.
Mhm.
We don't review them. We don't issue them conditionally, we don't issue them for a period of time,
Yeah, we did once.
only once.
The,
In 13 years, we've done it once. it just.
This requires us to do it every
Every
time.
year.
That's all right.
What comes to my mind with the more frequent review on this one? You know, since there's so many points here that we're making to
I agree.
see that it's regulated
Yeah,
and that they're following suit.
I agree with Emily.
Well, though we're not taking proposals, how would it be stated if it was a proposal?
Just change it to one
Just
year.
let me hear it.
I thought it was 1 year. That's not what this says.
Says they have to reapply for a special permit every 3 years.
Yes,
So who's gonna track that?
You are?
The zoning board of appeals?
the building commissioner. The building commissioner.
Yeah.
Going with the land, Sandy, that's okay. They have the mechanism. The building commission, the building department can do that.
Okay. It seems labor intensive to me.
Could you be more
But that doesn't mean
specific?
that couldn't be amended in the future, though,
Well,
you know, right?
Sandy, I don't understand, so
This-
could
this-
you help me?
Somebody is gonna have to track who has a special permit for marijuana and when it expires.
How about the police?
I can volunteer all kinds of people to do it, but who
Right.
has the manpower to do that?
Well, they have,
They have a lot of people I know.
No, this is a permit, and it
Would
really
you-
ought not to be, not to be tracked by the police department.
okay,
It ought to be tracked by the municipality.
Right.
And that would be if it's the zoning board of appeals, then it would be the building commissioner. This,
Or the
without,
planning department, because the ZBA falls under both.
Isn't this a wonderful example of where we just sit on our hands, and if their special permit expires, and if somebody in the town cares about it, then they'll tell them, and they'll tell them that they can't be operating because they haven't renewed in 3 years, and it'll go through X and Y, and ultimately it'll end up here again. But that's the rule,
it
but I don't
expi-
want to be the monitor
I don't
of.
either.
I don't know.
That's not
I don't
the
think
place.
we,
I don't wanna be the monitor of this.
I don't think this has to be
it's
changed.
the ZBA's place to be the monitor.
I don't think it has to be changed.
Could you read it as it stands?
I could accept it exactly as it stands. Well, what happened is, someone from the town, it doesn't add anything to the amendment to require a particular individual or agency to determine or to keep track of what the 3 years. We're going to give a special permit, it's going to expire in 3 years, period.
Exactly.
All right?
Okay.
And we know that it's a condition that it cannot, there's a negative here, but the fact is, the second sentence says something like this: unless you make a written request for renewal before 3 months prior to the expiration of that 3-year period, it's gone forever, or you have to come in a brand new.
Right.
That's what that says, by the negative interpretation. That's the way I see it, anyway. I think that's the way a judge would see it, too.
Yeah, no, I think that that's correct, and that's fine.
Are we
Or not
okay?
something we would opine on in any event. If, if the town wants to say that in this unique circumstance, our bylaws say that this particular special permit will only be good for 3 years, our job is to say yes. And then when we see it again, we'll make a decision. But to be the ones who are responsible to say your time is up or we're checking you, absolutely
So
not.
who would notify them? Because if
Yeah,
they might not
It doesn't say here
know.
who is responsible for that.
Right.
Well, yeah, what happens
If
is,
if it expires and they have no idea, you know, who's regulating that their permit.
this is
When
what
your
happens.
driver's
Operating
license-
with an expired special
When your,
permit.
right, when your driver's license expires,
Well, that's
it's not
gone.
the police's responsibility to come to you and say your license expired, or the motor vehicle bureaus, or the excise tax
So
people.
what about, alcohol permits? What are those called?
liquor
When you're
license.
selling alcohol, those expire, right?
Or
Right.
common
Who tracks
victular.
that?
It's a good
Who tracks
question.
that?
That's a good question that.
Probably a town
Raised.
administrator.
I have these wonderful reminders on your iPhone.
If you
Get
And you
license.
just plug it in 3
Sometimes
years in
common sense
advance.
is not
Yeah.
so
Why
common.
put it there at all? Why put it there at all for somebody to be in violation? What's the purpose of it? If you're not gonna enforce it, what's the purpose?
If,
Well, you are,
You.
because in the scheme,
The town. If the
Who's-
town's not gonna enforce it, why bother with it?
no, who's gonna keep track of it, Sandy, is the licensee. Because the licensee is gonna have to, like the expiration of a lease. Most leases provide that, or if there are allowances for a renewal of a term, provide that the option has to be exercised by giving notice to the landlord 3 months before the expiration of the term. That's exactly what happens here. And then there's a publication, and everyone's notified that the proposal is to renew this license. And if anyone objects, then the zoning board of appeals conducts a hearing to hear the objection and to hear the evidence and determine whether the renewal ought to occur. That's what the second paragraph says. That's a good system, because it keeps the town wired and the public wired into the process, so that they can come in and say, you know something, we've had, this kind of problem, that kind of problem over 3 years. There's been these number of complaints, there's been criminal cases arising out of it. Any number of complaints could be raised, and then it would not be in the public interest to renew the license. And we could, and we can hear people on it.
Sure.
Actually, there's more in that renewal process that comes into play. We have much more discretion than in the original petition to begin with.
you know what it reminds me of a little bit, Sandy, is so we grant the special permit. We're not the enforcers, we're not the explorers, we're not anything. If somebody has a beef with the special permit or with the implementation of the special permit or a violation of the special permit,
Goes to the enforcement authority.
exactly, it doesn't come to us.
Yeah, but that's also not to be reviewed every 3 years.
Yeah. You know, what are they gonna say? We'll review it the first time in 3 years and then,
So
I
so
mean-
what if somebody gets caught because they let it lapse, and now they have to come back before us again?
Fine,
yeah.
okay, that's all right. I think will be part of the
Just asking the
suggestion.
questions.
Yeah, part of the suggestion here was, whether there's an administrative burden placed upon the town to ride herd on the expirations. I think that was the original question, and I'm not really worried about it too much anymore, because if the licensee wants to protect that license, they'll do everything in their power to make sure that it's properly ticketed.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay, then I'll go and do the best I can. I encourage all of you to to circle the wagons with me, or to come individually, or whatever, and we'll see what comes out of the, I don't know what'll happen. I'm kind of curious as to see what other kind of public comment that's going to be. This may be a surprise to a lot of people in the town, because they haven't seen the actual enabling proposal yet. This is the first time. I am not making any effort to micromanage or edit this to suit the way that I would have written it if I were asked to do so.
Mr.